12 years, 12 freaking years since I have bought myself a MacBook Pro. Last time it was 2010, my first couple of salaries, I went and splurged on a 13-inch MacBook Pro with an Intel processor and a dedicated NVIDIA graphics card. It was fantastic. It absolutely smoked everything else. There was no alternative in the Windows PC laptop world that even came close. Software, hardware, didn't matter. 12 years later, and many questionable decisions from Apple, some questionable decisions from me, we'll not go into that. It's 2022 and I've finally mustered up enough courage to spend what seems like a disproportionately large amount of my savings to get the M1 MacBook Pro. This is the 16-inch M1 MacBook Pro. 10-core CPU, 16-core GPU, 10 neural engine cores, blah de blah. It's amazing. You've already seen the benchmarks, you know it's amazing, but why did I need one right now? After 6-7 years of using Windows, around 2014, 2015, I shifted back from the MacBook to the Windows ecosystem because Windows had gotten a lot better and I had a Razer Blade, and my latest laptop was this guy. This is the Main Gear Element. It's sort of a bang for buck thing you can find in Micro Center in the US of A. And for $1,600, this thing was pretty balling. i7-10700H RTX 2070 Super Max P, where the P stands for performance, kind of equivalent to a desktop grade RTX 2070. This thing was honestly pretty good value for money, but with battery life that'll just barely get you through a Pixar short film and literal hair dryers for cooling fans, this felt more like a desktop replacement than a good laptop. In came the M1 MacBook Pro. Needless to say, it kind of ran circles around this thing. It had performance, it had battery life, it had all those things, right? But you might say at this point, that's not fair, because the Main Gear Element is a $1,600 device and the MacBook Pro, this one at least, is $3,100. So that's not a fair comparison at all, is it? You know what? That's a fair point. I agree. So let's up the ante just a bit. This is my PC, and it's a bit of a beast if I do say so myself. I made a video on it. You can go see. So much pain. But what it is an 850 watt gold rated power supply powering a Ryzen 9 5900X, water cooled by the way, mated with an RTX 2080 Super, air cooled by the, I don't know why I'm excited about that, everything's air cooled by default. 32 gigs of 3200 MHz CL16 RAM, 1TB NVMe SSD for blazing fast read and write performance. Overall, might not be the most powerful thing on the market, but it is pretty damn good. Question is, how does the M1 MacBook Pro fare against that? Something that is arguably quite similarly priced. I'm gonna cut to the chase, guys. It smokes it. Runs circles around it. Now, not in all workloads. My use case, for example, is some office work, you know, emails, Word documents, all that sort of thing that can run on anything. A lot of media consumption, so Netflix, YouTube, maybe way too much YouTube for my own good, but only the really good channels, like this one. Subscribe. And video editing, live streaming, and gaming. Those three are probably my most intensive workloads. And for this use case, the M1 MacBook Pro excels. Now, obviously the office stuff is a no-brainer, unless you're running Excel sheets that have some kind of crazy GPU usage because all those floating point numbers, but if you're that kind of user, actually, I don't know. Is the M1 MacBook Pro not good enough for that workload? Comment down below if you're one of those people. I'd like to know. And as for watching videos and stuff, even potato PCs can handle that, am I right? Although, the MacBook clearly is geared towards media work. Not only does it come with an extra HDMI port and an SD card and support for Thunderbolt, which we'll get to in a second, you can do this two-finger swipe thing that scrubs back and forth, like forwards and reverses the video. It's just a little thing, but it's so smooth. Anyway, when it comes down to video editing, my god, this is fast. Just to show you a comparison, I recently went to Singapore on vacation and I shot my first vlog there. Audiophile heaven is what that place was. If you want to see the vlog, it's on the channel, you can go check it out. But that vlog was about 22, maybe 23 minutes of 4K footage, one after the other and sometimes one on top of the other, multiple layers, a soundtrack in the background, a whole bunch of things happening, right? And this PC rendered that video in about 20 minutes. and change. You wanna know what the M1 MacBook Pro did it in? Go on, take a guess. The comment section's down below. Take a wild guess, put yourself out there. You done? 13 minutes and 50 seconds. My M1 MacBook Pro rendered it in 13 minutes and 50 seconds. And not only that, while I was editing the video, I did the entire edit actually on the MacBook Pro, scrubbing through 4K footage that's been taken on a Sony camera like this one, using the XAVC codec can be challenging for the best of processors out there. Anyone who's edited video on the Sony codec will know this. This Ryzen 5900X sometimes struggles with this. When it's trying to skip between two files or even scrub back and forth between, it's choppy and it's not always smooth. The M1 MacBook Pro, smoother than a freshly waxed marble floor. It's almost flawless, I would say. Sometimes maybe you need to use the render cache, but mostly flawless. But it's not all rainbows and butterflies, right? There is one big caveat. The M1 MacBook Pro is not quite where it's at when it comes to GPU usage. So if you are doing, say, 3D rendering in Blender or that kind of thing, something that requires a lot of GPU usage, you're still probably better off getting something with a dedicated graphics card. However, there will be one major downside. The Windows laptop will give you the performance you want, but it will not give you the battery life because it sucks up a lot of power to give you that performance. And when it does that, it also generates a lot of heat, which means the fans spin up and it gets really, really loud to cool it down. Now here's what I didn't tell you. That render I was talking about, the 23-minute vlog render, 4K, lots of things happening, that was done after about 10 hours of editing work, all of which was done on the M1 MacBook Pro, and all of which was done with it unplugged. That's right, the entire thing was done on battery power and it was still flawless performance-wise. Not only that, at the end of it, I did the render, I uploaded it to YouTube, I made a thumbnail, all of that on battery power. And you know what the crazy part is? At the end of all of that, it still had juice left in the battery. I can't remember exactly how much, but the fact that it did all of that and still had power left is incredible. To quote another example, I recently went on a business trip, and on that trip, I had the charger with me, but I forgot to take one of those international conversion plugs and the hotel didn't have one. So I just did whatever work I had, no rendering work, but I watched the equivalent of maybe 3 hours of YouTube/movies, and I did some office work, and I charged up my Pixel 6 0 to 100%, and then again later in the day 50 to 100%, and I still didn't run out of battery. In fact, I finished the business trip, took the flight back, did a little bit of work on the flight, maybe half an hour's worth, nothing crazy. I was writing a script for this video actually. And when I came back, it still had about 35% battery left. So let's think about this. On the one hand, the performance is surprisingly good to the point where it's actually legitimately a desktop replacement, at least for my workloads and from what I understand for most people's workloads as well. And even if you are doing 3D renders in Blender and whatnot, even those companies are coming out with newer versions of their software that take advantage of the M1 and give you serious performance gains. And this isn't even the final iteration. The M2 is rumored to come out soon, and you can be damn sure they'll be improving GPU performance as well as CPU performance in that. So suffice it to say that right now, this little thing has effectively replaced my desktop and replaced my laptop in one device. And we haven't even talked about the wires. Look, it's no secret, if you have a PC like me, there's a bunch of spaghetti out there that I'm not allowing the camera to see. Nor will I. I will take this to my grave. But with this guy, because it has Thunderbolt, technically, you could do it all in one cable. Now, this monitor here also supports Thunderbolt, which means my one Thunderbolt wire can connect my M1 MacBook Pro to the monitor. And that cable is capable of outputting some seriously high refresh rate, high resolution video out to the monitor. 4K 60, not a problem. 2K 144Hz, not a problem. Thunderbolt can do it. But here's the real thing. Whilst doing that, the Thunderbolt wire is also capable of pulling up to about 100 watts of power from the monitor, powering your laptop. So now you don't need the MagSafe, you don't need a power cable. And what's more, this particular monitor happens to have a USB hub behind it, basically a couple of USB-A slots, which means you can even connect a couple of peripherals, say a wireless mouse or maybe a webcam, something. And that data also goes to the MacBook Pro via the same single Thunderbolt cable, which means effectively you could theoretically set up your desk so that the only power cable is from your monitor into the wall. That is phenomenal. Now, $3,000, it's a lot of money, but considering it's doing all of this, it's replacing multiple devices on your workflow and it's outperforming so many things so well. Honestly, it looks like MacBook Pros are once again serious value for money despite the price point, and I think it's safe to say the Mac is back. I'll see you in the next one. Stay happy, stay peaceful, stay colorful. Namaste.